Hi, this is James from 6Gamers, and this is my review of Deadpool, the video game. Now, I'm relatively new to the character of Deadpool, but what I've seen so far, I really like. In fact, the first time I even heard of Deadpool's existence was in Marvel vs. Capcom 3, so it took me quite a while to discover Mr. Wade Wilson from his conception in 1991 to the release of Capcom's title in 2011. So what are the traits that make Deadpool so appealing to me? He's immature.
Yeah, that's great, Peter. Talk to my dick.
Unbalanced, smug, deadly, and extremely aware of whatever media he's placed in. I personally find his antics extremely funny, and to some extent, charming. He's like a dog that pisses on your carpet, then turns around and gives you the puppy dog eyes. You forgive him despite the fact that you're totally aware he'll do it again. When I heard about the Deadpool game, it immediately screamed cash grab at me. Since my becoming aware of the character, Deadpool does appear to have become a lot more popular. This seeming rise in popularity could just be that I'm now more aware that the character exists, so follow him more closely. Then it was revealed that the game would not be being released at the usual AAA price point. While we should celebrate games becoming cheaper, since this practice is a rarity at this point, it raises alarm bells. Why is the company reducing the price point of the game? Why are there layoffs at the development house soon after the game's completion? It seems like there's not all that much faith in the product going on. So is Deadpool the video game the heaping pile of turd I fully expect it to be, or will it be a beautiful diamond in the rough? Let's kick off this review by summing up what the game's all about. Deadpool is looking to make his own video game, and with some gentle persuasion, is able to rope in the developer Highmoon, something the game makes sure to mention several times.
Highmoon Studios.
Highmoon? What the hell is Highmoon doing to my game? Clever, Highmoon.
So basically, you are playing Deadpool's game, and throughout your time playing, he'll comment on the game's awesome moments and shortcomings. In fact, there's one occasion where Deadpool doesn't like how the game pans out, and does a do-over in the form of a short montage, sending the game's budget into orbit. But what's the plot? Well, Deadpool isn't really a fan of exposition, so will immediately glaze over or find something a lot more interesting to invest his attention in. There's some stuff going down. Mr. Sinister's the big bad. There's various cameos from Cable and the X-Men. Stuff like that.
No goddamn way.
Whether you like or dislike this game will almost entirely hinge on if you find the game funny or not. I can happily say that I have never laughed out loud so many times while playing a video game. If you like your humour crass, self-referential, loud and making fun of the status quo, Deadpool the game is almost definitely for you. If you are offended by the mention of genitalia, overt violence and a sex-obsessed male, it ain't. What Deadpool says is offensive, and if it came from anyone else's mouth, I would get my torch and pitchfork and condemn this game to the pits of hell! But he is, as many characters say in the game, disgusting. Nothing this incarnation of Deadpool says is to be taken seriously, because he himself is a bit of a loser. He lives in squalor and is rejected by pretty much every female he hits on, even some of the ones he imagines. I think any player that sees Deadpool as a role model seriously needs to reassess their life choices. The game itself falls under the lovely broad classification of action-adventure. The game does have a wide variety of gameplay types introduced to it throughout. There's straight up brawler combat, which makes up a majority of the game, turret sections, stealth, light platforming, and a couple of nods thrown into the 8-bit gaming era, with a special platform section and an ode to Zelda.
You look familiar. Did I spin you like a beanie propeller and leave you in a motel room in Dubuque? No?
The combat serves its purpose. It's not as satisfying or as well executed as the Devil May Cry series or the Batman Arkham games, but it is still fun, and there aren't many major glitches that make you want to hurt people. Deadpool switches between melee and ranged combat with a broad array of weapons, which each have their own individual upgrades to be unlocked through points that you earn throughout the game, and by actually using the weapon in combat, more of these upgrades are made available. At melee range you have 3 weapons at your disposal. Deadpool's trademark dual katana, which are your middle of the road weapon both in power and speed, the lightning quick sai, and the hard hitting dual mallets. Each weapon serves its purpose admirably, and it is quite fun to switch on the fly mid-combat, even if the switching is a tad unresponsive. However, fully upgraded, the sai seems to blow the other 2 weapons out of the water, dealing more damage at a faster pace and having Deadpool's passive abilities proc more often. You do have to be a fair way into the game before this becomes an issue though. In melee range, Deadpool is also able to counter his aggressors. A button prompt will appear above the enemy's head, much like the Batman Arkham games, which lets you know when to perform the counter. When the counter is performed, there is a musical stab, very reminiscent of old-style comic cartoons, which made me smile a bit, and it's not intrusive enough to become annoying. Finally, in order to fully avoid attacks, Deadpool is able to teleport around the battlefield. The ranged arsenal is a lot broader than the melee. Deadpool has guns and gadgets at his disposal, which perform their roles as you would expect. The dual pistols are quite quick but weak, the shotgun is your heavy hitter, and your grenades blow stuff up, etc. The player again will find themselves using a variety of these weapons, as they each have their use. But even if the gamer does prefer a single ranged weapon, it is to their detriment, as Deadpool will wade his way through ammo faster than you can say, "Die! Die! Die, you asshole! Die!" When focusing on shooting, the camera will change to a third-person over-the-shoulder view, and the player is able to click their thumbstick to choose which shoulder the camera is looking over. With melee weapons and later guns, the more Deadpool pounds his opponents and the larger combos he strings together, the more momentum he earns. This momentum can be used to perform a variety of powerful attacks, which cannot be used again until the momentum is built back up again. The player is able to mix melee and gun attacks together, which makes for quite a satisfying combo. However, if the player uses guns for too long, they can end up switching back to the over-the-shoulder view, when they probably didn't want to, and this camera switch can be a little jarring and break the flow of combat slightly. This is a problem the whole combat system has. While it is predominantly satisfying to string together combos and watch your enemies burst into bloody giblets, the camera and a few minor bugs such as the enemies occasionally glitching up walls while you're pounding them into oblivion, and Deadpool's inability to attack enemies downstairs rather than swipe over their heads, can make the combat feel clunky at times. The combat actually starts out relatively challenging, since the enemies hit quite hard, but the more Deadpool and his weapons are upgraded, the more of a waltz down easy street it becomes. But it is quite nice to fuel a power fantasy every now and then. It would have been even nicer if the challenge the enemies presented kept up with Deadpool's upgrades though. The player does still have to be aware of their surroundings at all times, as the overconfident can find themselves getting ripped apart by gunfire, and the hardest difficulty does present a much bigger challenge when compared to the normal mode. Enemy variety is good, even if the design is a little bit uninspired and samey. This uninspired design is used for a joke within the game, but is most likely due to time constraints put on the developer. The variety in which enemies attack is to be commended though. You have your usual cannon fodder, gunners, enemies that fly through the air and attack with thunderstorms, and your big burly muscle men, as well as several more varieties. Some enemies are given one of 2 different auras to buff their allies, either a defensive aura which makes their allies immune to all damage bar finishing moves, which means you must first go for the guy emitting the aura, and yes, you can have 2 of these guys shielding each other, or the enemy has an aura which greatly increases the damage of their allies. It adds an extra mechanic to combat which makes the experience more tactically rewarding and enjoyable. In fact, I would have liked to have seen more of these auras introduced, perhaps one that slows Deadpool's melee attack rate, forcing the player to use guns or making the Sai the only viable melee weapon. There aren't many bosses in the game, and what's there is nothing to write home about. They each have a few little mechanics that make sure the player actually has to pay attention to the fights and can't just plough through them with no difficulty. The final boss, however, is extremely unimaginative and lame. Spoiler warning. It's like fighting a load of standard enemies, only sometimes he'll fire some lasers. It would have been nice to have had more boss encounters. There's pretty much 3 in the entire game. The other bosses are just powerful enemies that show up as standard enemies later in the game.
Oh man, zoom in on Tubbo up there. Stop dropping my camera, player. Thing was expensive.
Graphically, as you can probably tell by now by watching the video, Deadpool is not the best looking game, but it's easily serviceable. The biggest disappointment about the game's appearance is its environment design. It's all relatively dark and dingy, seeming to rely on today's standard of greys and browns. With a character as vibrant as Deadpool, it would have been nice to have seen some colour and imagination injected into the environments too. And yes, I'm aware that this is due to the game being set in the ruined mutant nation of Genosha, but Enslaved Odyssey to the West had a ruined city to work with, and they made it look gorgeous. Example! Other playstyles are simplistic and well put together. Turret sections never outstay their welcome and are viscerally satisfying as they should be. Stealth sections tend to be far too short, Deadpool often just killing one guy before moving to the next room, but they nicely change the pace and each kill animation is pretty amusing. The obvious also holds true. If you stealth kill a guy with a gun, you will alert the other enemies in the area. Platforming is never overly complex, but fun. Deadpool's athletic ability allows him to perform wall jumps and double jumps, and the player is never asked to do anything too precise. Any puzzles are simple, and if you're in your early 20s or above, you will love the nods to the 8-bit era, purely because of the nostalgia factor. No styles of play ever wear out their welcome, bar some combat sections that go on for far too long. The final battle, in particular, is a bit of a slogfest. So, in conclusion, is Deadpool worth buying? It's quite a difficult game to recommend, as the campaign only clocks in at around the 6-hour mark, and there isn't much to do after completing it bar a few combat challenges. It's short, and there's no multiplayer, which wouldn't be an issue for me if there was a bit more single-player content. I, however, am extremely glad I purchased the title. While the combat may be pretty average, the humour on the whole really appeals to me. The game is written by the current writer of the comics, Daniel Way, and his overtly psychotic version of Deadpool translates well into the video game and the style of the game. So yes, the game is worth getting. If the length puts you off, then it is definitely worth a purchase when either the price drops a little, or you can pick it up on a Steam sale or something like that.
Come on, don't you have balls to lick? Come lick my balls.
I'm pretty sure I've made my opinions on the game clear, but for those of you that prefer their opinion in numerical values, here comes the score. All of what our scores indicate are found in the description below. I give Deadpool the video game a 7 out of 10. Gameplay wise, the game is really at a 5 out of 10 level, but Deadpool carries this game, and Way's sense of humour just really clicked with me. The laughs this game gave me was worth another 2 points. The game isn't a steaming pile of turd, but a diamond covered in a bit of turd. Thanks for watching. This is the channel's first review, so comments and advice would be hugely appreciated. And if you have any recommendations on where to start my Deadpool comic collection, let me know.